Yeah.
Imagine being on Wake Tech Southern Main campus and a campus police car is parked in between the buildings and you're headed to class and they're blocking the way. This can be pretty frustrating. Imagine being a blind student and this happening too. This has happened to me several times. This is actually dangerous. This is why the ADA has set guidelines that you have to abide by. Now imagine if you were disabled or if your family member was a disabled student and this was one of the barriers that they had to face. Imagine how they feel. Now, even though Wake Tech has to abide by the guidelines set by the ADA, there's still a miscommunication between staff and disabled students at Wake Tech. I am a blind disabled student and I have dealt with many barriers here at Wake Tech. Today, I will be discussing the educational rights of a disabled student, why Wake Tech should require all staff to take staff developmental training, and the benefits of these staff developmental trainings. First, let's begin with the educational rights granted to a student with a disability. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, the Americans with Disability Act of 1990, and the Americans with Disability Act Amendment Act of 2008 are civil rights laws that prohibit any discrimination in higher educational settings to a student with a disability. According to Deller Singh's article, Educational Rights of a Student with a Disability, Singh explains that the ADA defines disability in very broad terms. The federal laws and the ADA state any condition that substantially limits life activities is considered to be a disability. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act acknowledges 13 disabilities, such as, just to name a few, hearing impairments, visual impairments, mental and physical disabilities. Did you know that stress and anxiety disorders are actually considered to be a disability? Now, let's discuss Wake Tech's policy on how to handle a student with a disability. Wake Tech's admission office would not know if a student is disabled because they are not allowed to ask that question during the admission process. So, a disabled student would actually have to self-identify that they are disabled. They would have to contact Disability Support Service, provide accommodation, provide a letter from their doctor or physician or a hearing or specialist or learning specialist stating the type of accommodations that would be needed. DSS then plays the mediator in providing accommodations to the student and making sure that the professors get the accommodations and can provide these accommodations to the student. Now, let's discuss why Wake Tech should require all staff to take these staff development trainings. First, these staff development trainings will educate staff on how to provide proper accommodations to a student. For instance, if a blind student requires a tactile map to be used for a map that was sent, they would ask for visuals to be sent to them prior to class or the map to be sent to Disability Support Service, and they would make a tactile map like this one. This map helps you learn what you're learning in class. If these maps are not sent to the student in time, it can hinder the student's learning. Or it could also make the student not want to request accommodations in the future. According to universities' procedures, resources, and staff practices, impact of college students with disabilities, students feel like their accommodations are not being met. So these educational practices will actually help the staff learn how to provide these proper accommodations. Next, these staff development trainings will help provide education to staff on how to avoid potential hazards on campus. Let's go back to that campus car on parked on campus. If this was a student who had a physical disability or visual impairment trying to get around this car, that could be pretty dangerous in itself. So these staff trainings is good to help them learn how to make the environment safe for a student. Lastly, let's discuss the benefits of these staff trainings. These staff trainings could alleviate some of the negative barriers that a student faces while they're on campus. According to, it's all about learning as a community, facilitating the learning of a student with a disability in a higher classroom, educational classroom. They conducted surveys with 16 disabled students. These students stated that their negative barriers that they faced was faculty perspective. Imagine being in a classroom and your professor has this perspective that you can't complete the schoolwork, that you can't do this work. Well, these staff trainings will educate these professors on how you complete your work. Next, these trainings could alleviate some of the potential lawsuits that Wake Tech could face. With these professors not wanting to provide the proper accommodations, they could be sued. This school could be sued. There are plenty of lawsuits out there because students are not getting the proper accommodations that the ADA states that they should be getting. So these educational staff meetings would actually help educate these professors. Now, today I have discussed educational rights granted to a student with a disability, why Wake Tech should require all staff to take staff development training, and the benefits of these staff development trainings. Even though Wake Tech is supposed to abide by the guidelines set by the ADA, there's still a disconnect between staff and students with disabilities. Now, the last thing I'm going to say, let's all come together and let's all write to the president of Wake Tech, Scott Ross, and let's demand that all staff be required to take staff development training to to properly handle a student with a disability. Don't let that police car be your barrier.